The cue list is the perfect solution for productions requiring identical actions in the same order night after night. Not every show is this structured, however, and sometimes there may be a need to jump to any cue instantly, possibly firing an audio sting or using Telnet to change a camera feed on a video mixer. The Hot Cues window, found in the View menu, can be used for exactly this purpose. It contains 5 pages of 20 assignable hot buttons. Simply dragging a cue from the cue list onto an empty button will assign it to that button. The description, background colour and font used in the button can be customised in the editor shown. Any further changes to an existing button can be achieved with a right-click and selecting Edit Button. Whenever the button is clicked, or pressed if using a touchscreen, the cue will fire. Enabling the Data Only checkbox will prevent the cue list from changing position while still firing the data within the cue. Cues can now be fired instantly and independently of the main cue list. Of the 5 pages, the visible page can be chosen with the right-click context menu or, on a cue-by-cue basis, through the System Command window, covered later. Buttons can also be assigned a keyboard shortcut key to allow instant fire from the keyboard. In some circumstances, it may be useful to have a permanent set of buttons to hand, such as device controls, whilst changing others, such as sound effects for a specific section of a show. To achieve this, the window can be split into a chosen static page as well as the standard page. To automate changes of which standard pages are shown on a cue-by-cue basis, the System Command module mentioned earlier can be used. Found under the View menu, this module allows many of CSC's toolbar, mouse click or keyboard options to be automated, along with certain configuration options. In this particular case, the command Go to Hot Cues page can be used, which requires us to enter one further value, the page we need. In the same way as other modules, the plus button can be used to add the event to the currently selected cue. For a full list of commands available, consult the documentation. For many applications though, direct operation of the computer, using a mouse and keyboard or even touchscreen, is not desirable or even physically possible. Furthermore, sometimes there is a need to synchronize events to lighting or video systems with a greater degree of accuracy than human response time. CSC includes a range of options to enable control of cues via external systems. This includes a variety of methods using the well-established MIDI protocol, as well as newer options over a local area network. Internally, CSC itself can use a network link to create a master-slave system to ensure a backup computer is always in sync with the main. Setting up CSC for use with MIDI control firstly requires setting the MIDI control port. This can be found under the MIDI control mapping in the MIDI menu. Here, the MIDI interface to be used for control input can be specified. There is also an optional MIDI timecode port available. This allows a dedicated MIDI timecode stream to be connected to CSC to prevent the need to merge timecode with other messages in a busy MIDI stream, which may cause corruption of data. A channel can be set to listen for MIDI messages on, or Omni can be used to listen to all channels. An ID can also be set for use when controlling CSC with MIDI Show Control messages. A full list of messages CSC will respond to can be found in the documentation. There are further options found here for MIDI through and debounce time, as well as the Cue Control Assignments table. In this table, it is possible to assign an incoming note on or program change message to a specific function in CSC. Data can be entered manually or captured from the MIDI import by double-clicking on any row and sending the MIDI message to CSC. Note that any changes to the MIDI interface will need to have been applied before being able to use this function. The second tab details the control change messages that will be interpreted within the Live Mixer module. Another dedicated MIDI port can be assigned for the job, or the input can be shared with the general cue control on the first tab. The Live Mixer can send MIDI messages to a control surface as well as receive to ensure moving faders are always in sync with the on-screen CSC faders. Once the input port has been chosen, a working system can be inspected in the MIDI monitor window found under the MIDI menu. This window can show any incoming MIDI data and allow certain types of message to be filtered, such as timecode quarter frame messages, which would otherwise flood the screen. Incoming MIDI timecode streams can be monitored using the timecode display window. It should be noted that this window can also show timecode based on the internal timer or system clock, as well as the external MIDI source. Source selection and timer control are available in the System Command module. As well as using MIDI to control global transport functions for the cue list, individual cues can also be assigned a MIDI trigger. Double-clicking on any cue to open the edit window allows the trigger source to be changed to either a note-on message, a program change message, or a specific timecode position. They can be entered manually or captured from the MIDI input by selecting the Capture button. Selecting the Data Only checkbox will ensure that the events within the cue are fired, but the cue list position will remain unchanged. If exact timecode positions are not known in advance, they can be captured during a rehearsal, for example, using the timecode capture window found in the MIDI menu. Once enabled, any cue that is triggered manually while CSC is reading incoming timecode can be assigned the current timecode position. The cue trigger map can be used to see an overview of what MIDI messages have been assigned to cues and can be shown filtered by note on, program change, or timecode. Using a combination of MIDI triggered cues set to data only and a MIDI generating device such as a keyboard allows the cue list to be controlled globally by a show operator, while secondary cues such as click tracks can be fired remotely by a conductor in an orchestra or band pit. However, being able to send many unique MIDI messages from a remote location isn't always possible. If a show contained 30 click tracks, for example, the remote control device would either need to have 30 buttons or have its own internal cue list running. A more common approach would be to have a second remote box with only go and stop buttons and using an off-the-shelf MIDI generator to create messages for each button. This would then, however, involve sharing the main cue list between operator go button presses and the conductor go button presses, which could become problematic. CSC includes an external trigger module designed to handle this scenario. Found in the View menu, the External Triggers window provides 4 mini cue lists, which can be populated with references to cues in the main list simply by dragging a cue into one of the 4 lists. In this way, a list of cues for the musical conductor can be arranged, and with further use of the data-only option, the operator cue list position will remain untouched whilst the musical cues are fired one after another. The MIDI control mapping window provides full access to this module so that all 4 lists can be controlled with remote buttons. If further interrogation or a remote view of these lists is required, the CSC T-Remote iPad app can be used to remotely view any specified list. Markers to resync with the main cue list can also be dragged into the lists, as well as loops to create never-ending sequences of cues from an external button. The trigger lists can be further enhanced by locking a list until a specific cue is reached in the main list, usually to prevent a remote trigger being accidentally fired, as well as automatically advancing a list when a cue point is reached. This could be used, for example, to ensure a list of backup voiceovers are ready to fire in case a secondary VT source didn't play, or the onstage gun didn't go off. As well as MIDI control, CSC can be triggered over a network using the OSC protocol, plain text messages, or inbuilt CSC communication. The CSC settings window contains tabs to configure all aspects of network control. The Network Tracking tab enables the designation of a CSC system as either a master or slave machine. Once configured on the same subnet, a slave machine will automatically find the master and create a connection. From there on, any cue activity on the main machine will be replicated on the backup. This is a more flexible solution to dual systems than simply splitting a go button, as it allows cues to be fired in any order with the knowledge the slave will always be in sync. A toolbar indicator shows whether a slave machine is still online. The iDevice tab allows the connection of the iOS T-Remote app, which enables a remote view of a selected trigger list. The OSC Control tab enables the receiving of OSC messages. A comprehensive range of messages can be interpreted by CSC, enabling large amounts of control over the software, in particular the transport controls and mixer elements. There are many third-party OSC applications available, and the use of any of these will allow a custom control surface to be designed for CSC. Enabling the Send Status option will ensure changes within CSC are sent back to a remote device, as well as just receiving, and enabling Full Mixer Control will send messages every time the CSC mixer is changed to keep a remote surface in sync. Care should be taken before enabling this, as the number of network messages sent could become quite large. If a controlling device is not able to form OSC messages, then plain text messages following the same structure can be sent by preceding them with the string CSC. Consult the documentation for more information. As well as networking, tracking, and OSC control, simple messaging and call features between CSC machines can be achieved using the network messaging window found under the View menu. Finally, for unattended standalone operation, CSC provides two distinct methods for triggering queues at times of day. For an individual queue to be fired at a specific time of day, modify the queue timecode trigger to match the required time. The MIDI timecode source can be set to system clock, either manually selecting the input on the timecode window or using the system command module to execute that change in a setup queue. For a more general approach, the clock triggers module can be used. This allows a list of times of day to be entered, along with an action such as go or stop. This can then be used to simulate a button press at those specific times. Note, however, that this method does involve leaving the queue list in the correct standby position, as no individual queue is targeted, although it does mean several time entries can be added, such as a daytime and evening sequence of events, without having to change the queue timecode entries.